welcome to El Salvador, a Central American nation of just 6 million people that until a few years ago was one of the most dangerous countries in the world. Powerful gangs controlled entire neighborhoods, extorted businesses, recruited children, and in the process fueled one of the highest homicide rates anywhere on earth. But the election in 2019 of political outsider Nayib Bukele transformed the country. Investigative journalists and the U.S. government say Bukele's administration initially sought to negotiate with the gangs, an allegation his government denies. But after those efforts collapsed, he declared a state of exception that has now lasted more than 4 years. The results have been dramatic. Violence in El Salvador plummeted, and experts say the gang structures have been dismantled. So successful has this security model been that its appeal has extended well beyond the borders of El Salvador. But in the process, more than 90,000 people have been arrested, a staggering 1.5% of the population. And 4 years on, the state of exception is still in place, having been extended over 50 times. It has concentrated extraordinary powers in the hands of the state, and specifically in the hands of the president. Critics say thousands of innocent victims have been caught up in the crackdown. For most of his life, Antonio Herrera has made a living ferrying passengers between the island of Espiritu Santo and the mainland in southeastern El Salvador. Like many here, he says he had to pay extortion money to the country's once powerful gangs. Refusing, he told me, would have meant certain death for him and his family. Espiritu Santo is an island of 1,400 residents, only accessible by boat. But what's different about this place is that gang violence was never really a problem here, even before the state of exception. The only connection to gangs was in the port of El Triunfo, some 20 minutes from here, a place where many residents are forced to go to for school, work, or medical care. Despite that relative calm, Roncon, as he's known here, and his 21-year-old son were among 25 islanders who were arrested in the early months of El Salvador's state of exception, which suspended the rule of law. They were accused of collaborating with the gangs. He sat in prison for a year before being released pending trial, nearly 30 kilos lighter, and without ever being allowed to see his family or his lawyer. I didn't want to leave that prison without my son, he tells me. And now, even those who were freed have begun receiving notifications for their upcoming mass trials, where they will be judged alongside dozens, or in some cases hundreds, of other people. The government says mass trials are the only way to clear the backlog of arrests. But critics say it's impossible to judge anyone fairly when they're tried alongside hundreds of others. Journalists have been allowed into only one such trial, featuring known gang members. But little is known about the tens of thousands of other people who have been arrested. Human rights lawyers we interviewed say they know of no acquittals to come out of any mass trials under the state of exception. I asked Roncon what that meant for his future.
I am scared. The prosecutors aren't checking if people belong to the gang or not, if they are guilty or not. Everyone is getting condemned. If I go to a mass trial, I am never coming back.
Leslie Schuld leads an NGO that's been providing legal representation to dozens of people detained under the state of exception.
We have had 2 villagers already condemned to 25 and 30 years. Even though we presented documents, witnesses, laws, contradicting the accusation, the judge condemned all 66 based on the testimony of a hooded witness.
For some, it's too late even for a trial. Marta Vega's 2 sons, Vidal and Jose, were arrested in 2022 from their home about an hour from Espiritu Santo. Years earlier, the family had fled to this community after gangs threatened Marta's sons. Last year, she learned of 24-year-old Jose's death in prison through social media, hours before any authority called her to notify her. All she has now is this death certificate saying he died of sepsis.
The police said they got a call about him, and that's why they arrested him. I asked why they didn't investigate first. He said when they get a call, they just go get the person.
El Salvador's gangs have left deep scars on this country. But for families like Antonio's and Marta's, The end of gang rule marked the beginning of another painful chapter. The government insists these cases are the exception, not the norm. But they also bring up an important question. If El Salvador is now one of the safest countries in the world, why is there still a need for emergency powers? I asked that question to the Vice President, Felix Ulloa.
The state of exception, it's a constitutional tool that we have and the government put in place because it's the way to protect our population. And the proof that the population felt protected is because 96% of the population approve every month the extension of this specific situation.
You then see a scenario where for as long as you are in power in this country, as long as the majority of people approve it, that state of exception could continue?
That is how democracy works. And the real commitment in that democracy is to organize free and fair election. It is something that it has a big concern abroad, not inside the country.
I want to jump in there because people have said to us, we know we're paying a high price and we may come to regret that.
Tell me, who told you that? I mean,
let me give you an example. Yesterday, the taxi driver, he says he will vote for Bukele again, yet he said, I'm worried about how much power we're giving up.
That is how democracy works.
Mass trials are now a regular part of the judicial system here. But we've asked journalists, we've asked lawyers, we've asked human rights offenders about how many of these proceedings have taken place, how many are in course, how many people are being judged in them, and no one really seems to know. Why is there so much secrecy around these proceedings?
I think that if you do some research
I
on the internet,
did.
you will see how many of them have been in the trial, how much of them have been condemned. So that is a public information. This is an innovation in the criminal law. If we have more than 90,000 people captured, how do you trial fairly in a short period of time? If you go in the traditional way, that you go one by one, you will spend thousands of years. So that's what we create this new figure that the criminal responsibility belongs to the structure, not to the individual.
I don't know if you saw the Amnesty International report that came out last night. I just want to read it and just have your reaction.
Yeah.
The evidence documented here reveals the existence of a targeted, widespread, and systematic attack against the civilian population. What do you say to that?
I mean, I heard that exactly the same 3 years ago. And they repeated 2 years ago. And they repeated 1 year ago. Ask them how many times they have come here. This government is more concerned than any international organization or human rights or think tank to protect the rights of the victims of the population.
Is the Bukele model exportable?
The Bukele model is not exportable for two reasons. One, because you need to have a leader as he is. I mean, it's very special leadership. But second, you have to create the conditions. You need to align the three branches of the government because the executive was strong, but the legislative blocking all the initiative. When we got the initiative from the government and like they have to sign to send it to the Congress, it was blocked by the Constitutional Court. So we have to change the Constitutional Court. Now the three branches are aligned.
That was Salvadorian Vice President Felix Ulloa speaking to Al Jazeera. And whether or not the government here thinks its model can be exported, the reality is that across Latin America, politicians are already trying to do just that. For a closer look at that, we now go to Colombia, where the president-elect has recently won an election on a campaign that many say is heavily influenced by the so-called Bukele model.
I'm Alessandro Ampieti outside Colombia's presidential palace, where in a matter of days, President-elect Abelardo de la Espriella will take office. He's just the latest example of a far-right politician in Latin America winning elections promising to follow the Bukele model. During the campaign, he praised the Salvadorian president, he promised a hardline security platform, and also said he will build 10 mega prisons. And in the region, he's not alone. Ecuador has gone the furthest, with President Daniel Noboa declaring a state of internal conflict, deploying the military against the gangs, and building a new maximum security facility inspired by Bukele's Secot. In Honduras, President Nasri Asfura has repeatedly extended a state of emergency there, while also increasing joint operations by the military with the police and announcing plans for new Bukele-style prisons. In Peru, President Keiko Fujimori has made the Bukele model and its prisons the centerpiece of her campaign, while also announcing new tough anti-crime law. And countries like Chile, Costa Rica, and Bolivia have also recently turned to the right by embracing part of the model.
The Bukele model has attracted attention far beyond El Salvador's borders, but its enduring strength comes from its popularity here at home, where nearly 80% of the population approve of the government's security policies. In the Mexicanos neighborhood of San Salvador, newly painted murals tell the story of a community that survived decades of gang violence. Today, many people say they are finally able to speak openly.
We couldn't even stand around here and ask any questions. There was no government to protect us, much less punish what was happening at the time. You couldn't speak, you couldn't say anything. You couldn't talk about what was happening here.
This graffiti tour is part of an effort to rebuild a community where government numbers show homicides have dropped by more than 90% since a state of exception was declared 4 years ago. The project includes reclaiming spaces once controlled by gangs. The government says security is only the first step in a broader plan to transform El Salvador into a regional leader in tourism, technology, and artificial intelligence. For now, many seem willing to give it a chance. A poll by the University of Central America suggests 77% of Salvadorans support the government's security measures, and nearly 90% think the president is doing a good job of running the country. Among them is Maria Puro, whose son was killed in gang violence in 2021. She thinks the state of exception should be made into law.
I hear complaints that our streets are full of holes that haven't been fixed. But I don't care if there are potholes. At least I don't see young people full of bullet holes.
Critics accuse Bukele of consolidating power, restructuring the courts and electoral authorities, and changing the rules to allow his re-election. Hundreds of journalists and human rights defenders have been forced into exile.
People call the president a dictator, and I often say if that's what people want to call him, then maybe that's exactly what we needed. We needed someone with strength of character, someone willing to make difficult decisions, because otherwise there wouldn't be any young people left.
Unable to save her own son, Maria has found purpose caring for children growing up in neighborhoods once controlled by gangs. Working alongside her today is Adonia Luna, part of El Salvador's vast diaspora. She stayed away from her country for a decade because of the violence. Now she returns regularly.
I think the president is doing a great job. I know there's a lot of innocent people inside of jail, but there was a lot of people doing a lot of wrong things too. He had to do what he had to do.
The gangs may no longer pose the dangers they once did, but as emergency measures become increasingly entrenched and power more concentrated, many Salvadorans are facing a different question. What does this mean to the future of their democracy? That's all from us in El Salvador. Thanks for watching Inside Latin America. Now back to Doha with more news.